Welcome to episode 37, Construction Nation. This is Sue Dyer, your host of Construction Dream Team, where I interview industry leaders and experts so you can learn about the people side of construction and build your construction dream team based on OPE, other people's experiences. You don't have to suffer through on your own. You can actually learn from people who've been there and done that so that you can enhance your projects and your teams like overnight. Why wait months or maybe years? And I hope that all of you that are listening will jump on over to iTunes and subscribe to Construction Dream Team. And while you're there, if you give us a little rating, that'd be great. 5 stars would be wonderful. It does help us get higher in the search engines so more people from Construction Nation can find us. So today we are very lucky to have Gregory Grabowski with us. He is the president of GCC LLC. And Greg is kind of an unusual person who has gone from being a contractor through many different paths and ranks to now being a professional partnering facilitator. So I thought, wow, that's an interesting road to go through. Let us have Greg come and share with us some of his journey. And I know a lot of his journey has also been working on very large projects outside the country, which I think will also perhaps give you some insights on what you can do on your projects. So welcome, Greg. Welcome to Construction Dream Team.
Thank you, Sue. Glad to be here.
So I know that you have worked a lot of places, but let me just give a little bit of background to Greg. Right now, his company is GCC and Associates, and they provide project controls and partnering consulting services. Greg has learned by doing and has worked a great deal overseas on many large complex projects, as I had mentioned. And so, Greg, with that, I'll pass the baton to you to tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are become a professional partnering facilitator with your own company.
Thanks, Sue, and I very much appreciate it. Appreciate being invited to speak and talk about how we all kind of end up coming into and out of and back into the industry. So I started my career in the U.S. Navy. I was a surface warfare officer, and I did that both active duty and reserve for 22 years. In the meantime, I picked up mechanical engineering licenses both in California and in Alaska, as well as a general contractor's license in California. I worked with some international design build firms, Fluor Corporation, Jacobs, and I went overseas and did some projects in South Korea, South America, Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Kuwait, Qatar, and basically every continent with the exception of, ironically, Europe and Antarctica. So I've not done a project in Europe or Antarctica, but I'm looking forward to those. A few years ago, I left the industry for a few years. I was going to take some time off just for myself and my wife. And I ended up getting calls from colleagues asking me to come back and do that thing that we used to do sort of together, partnering, kind of making sure the alpha's in the room, kind of hugged it out before they slugged it out. And so as a veteran, I started a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. And we're working generally with my colleagues that I used to work directly with in the same company as an external facilitator and helping projects sort of find their way. Been very fortunate to have high technology, pure science, commercial, federal, and institutional. And so far, it's been very rewarding helping teams to find that sweet spot for themselves and ensure that, at least in the terms of the team's communication and collaboration, that they're in line for success.
And I know that you have served as both project manager and project executive on some large projects. So let's kind of start there and tell us a little bit about your career working as a project executive overseas. And what are sort of the challenges you saw with the projects when you were working in that role?
Well, it really comes down to culture. A lot of people like to fall back into their comfort zones of the contract and the schedule and the funding profile. But it really is about people. And any project that I went to, I found that if you have tremendous funding and a wonderful greenfield environment and a jurisdiction having permitting authority that's very compliant and a local community that supports the project, if you still have the wrong team in place, a team that doesn't communicate, collaborate, and execute cohesively as a team, you can pull defeat out of the jaws of victory, given all other potential success factors. The opposite is also true, especially in an overseas environment. Culturally, you can have a very restrictive environment, inadequate resources, a very challenging schedule, plans and specifications that perhaps were developed overseas for overseas building requirements. But with the right team in place and the right culture of collaboration and communication with local contractors, local funding sources, and local suppliers, that team can be successful given all of the points against them. So that was the biggest lesson that I learned, is nurturing the culture wherever the culture happens to be, wherever the team happens to be, and nurturing the culture within the context of nurturing the team within the context of that culture.
I'm sure you have some stories about some projects where you may have learned this lesson. So spill for us.
So, yeah, I've got a number of potential. So all of our wonderful experiences that stay in our minds are the result of some stressful times and some arduous experiences. One time in Kuwait, in northern Kuwait, I was the project executive for the Ali Al Salim Air Base for the U.S. Air Force. This is in preparation for logistic movements up north. And we had local suppliers who were being shaken down locally just to get cement and building materials onto the job site. And so when I say shaken down, what I mean is they were asked to pay tolls and fees, on roadblocks in and out of northern Kuwait, which, the contract doesn't allow for that, right? The contract doesn't allow for these extra fees. So what I did was, after a couple of weeks of understanding what the real issue is, we brought all the teams in together and collaboratively, we said, look, let's have one of our folks in every single truck leaving the airport and leaving the port so that every one of our folks can be in the truck. And guess what? All those fees, all of a sudden, and those roadblocks disappeared. It cost us nothing. But for us to understand what the local suppliers are going through in terms of dealing with the bureaucracy of their own host nation, their own country, if we could find a way that was cost neutral, that we could facilitate them getting their contractual job done for us, everybody wins. I could have easily had slid back into the comfort zone of the contract and said, you are required to deliver me structural steel and concrete and sand and aggregate and water on these dates. And if you don't, then I'm going to backcharge you. But ultimately, that would not have helped the project to be successful because I would not have received my materials. By placing one of our U.S. nationals in every single truck, in every single convoy, all the way up to the job site, we were able to help our suppliers, and we were ultimately able to ensure that the project was successful.
Cool. Yeah. So some different challenges than we might find on our everyday domestic projects, but very interesting indeed. So you went there from, I understand you have sort of a story, but you became an internal partnering facilitator for Fluor. So tell us a little bit about that story.
So I was traveling around the world assessing and restaffing projects that are in trouble. Restaffing projects that are in trouble is sort of a euphemism for flying into a country, doing some interviews with our local execution staff who may be struggling with the client or the situation on the ground, and replacing them. And it was, that's a very emotional process when you fly somewhere and you have to fire somebody. I didn't like doing it. And I went to my boss and I said, look, I know what happened in Chinhae, South Korea. This was an email and a meeting that went bad. And then the client and our major subcontractor and our project manager, they started diverging in terms of the communication. Everybody started hiding behind their keyboards and writing emails back and forth. Next thing you know, letters are going back and forth. I convinced my boss at Fluor at the time if she could allow me to go and fix the problem rather than replace the team. So she said, okay, you get Chinhae, go ahead and do that. It took about 6 weeks. I brought everybody together. We had dinner out on the town. We did some volleyball. We had some barbecues. And ultimately, we got to an understanding and some real specific heart-to-heart talks about unrealized expectations. Things are not in the contract. They're not in the scope of work, but they're essential for project success. And this is simply people thinking about what they say before they write, and speaking about it before they or thinking before they speak, and speaking before they write, and then ensuring that we have a commitment for no written surprises back and forth between the team members. That was successful. I asked if she could allow me to do that again. We had another project in Jose, Venezuela. That took about 3 months to do, but ultimately we got that project to be successful. I had a failure in Manish Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. That didn't go as well as I had hoped. But again, Kuwait was successful, and then other projects in North America were successful again. I became sort of known, this has been the late 90s and early 2000s, as sort of the internal facilitator. It wasn't my day job, but it was sort of a part-time thing to do. Hey, the project's having some trouble. The client is upset. The contractors are upset. Letters are starting to fly back and forth. Let's get Gregory to fly out and see if he can do an assessment as a third party. Even though I was a project executive with Fluor, I was seen as a third party from the project. Now, there's some biases that obviously happen when you're in that situation. It's not ideal, but that's the situation that we were in. And ultimately, it worked out more often than it didn't.
Cool. So I know I heard you talk a little bit about your perspective now that you're really a third party to the projects that you're working with. So what do you see as sort of the difference between being the third party neutral and being an internal partnering facilitator?
Well, it really comes down to perceived bias. I may be as neutral as possible, but if somebody comes into the room or into a contract with some of their walls up, their communication and collaboration walls up, it's difficult for someone whose paycheck directly reflects the prime contractor's name and corporate logo. It's difficult for them to be seen as really ultimately very neutral. The ideal situation is to hire a third-party outside facilitator, one who doesn't have skin in the game and whose paycheck is not tied to one company or the other's particular success. I found that both being an internal facilitator and being an external facilitator, being paid by ultimately the owner rather than a contractor or a prime construction manager or a major sub, being paid by the owner ultimately alleviates all of the preconceptions associated with what an internal facilitation bias might bring to the table.
Yeah, I see that too. And of course, that doesn't mean you can't do a lot of good work internally.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
When people are really entrenched and stuck, yeah, it's hard to get past that.
Yeah, sure.
Years ago, we tried to do a scorecard program internally. We're one of the really large organizations I was working with, and no one would fill it out. They said,
right.
"I'm not letting my boss see that. No, I'm not doing that." Yeah,
exactly.
So you've seen projects from the point of view of project manager, project executive, professional partnering facilitator. You've kind of seen an array of projects. What do you wish most project managers would do that they don't do?
Yeah, if I could sit down with PMs before they started to execute the project, and even while they're going through contract negotiations, I would say build a professional and even a personal rapport with the key stakeholders that are going to be part of the project for months or years. Start to talk. Don't bring the contract in, just our most important requirements. What keeps you up at night? If I'm a contractor or a design build prime, well, I know what the contract says. I know what the plans are. I know what the specifications are. I know the schedule. I know the budget. I know the cash flow. I've got all that stuff in writing. What I don't have in writing is, what is the one or two things that keep my client up at night? What is he really worried about? How does he like to be communicated to? Does he want me to send him emails over the weekend? Does he want to have some heads up on something that might happen on Monday, or should I wait for Monday? Is this person who really bifurcates their time and says Saturday and Sunday are my personal time and really don't correspond with me? These unwritten requirements, which pervade every single contract since the first pharaoh wanted to contract for limestone for the first block and the very first pyramid. There's these unwritten requirements that are in every single contract. And I would mentor project managers to find out what those are. Keep the paper out of the conversation. Keep the contract out of the conversation and say, have a heartfelt conversation with your stakeholders, all of them: owner, prime contractor, prime subs, major subs, and even the end users who may be different than the owners. Bring them into a room and just have some coffee and say, what is the most important thing for you? Let me know what that is so I can always take that into context and consideration when we're dealing with executing difficult project decisions.
Excellent. So you've been leading projects, leading project teams, leading organizations. What do you think is your greatest strength as a leader?
I have built buildings and I have built teams and relationships. And what I find to be the most rewarding is to build a team. And when I say build a team, I'm not talking about a team building exercise. I'm talking about a real cohesive, high-performing, self-correcting team that has trust and collaboration built into the fiber. Once you take care of the team will take care of the project. So I find most rewarding the ability to help the team to find their own sweet spot, because every team of professionals has a lot of personalities, a lot of agendas, and they bring a lot of experiences to the table. And every single one of them is necessary for the project to be successful. They wouldn't be paid to be there. So what I find the most rewarding thing to do is to assess a team, talk to them, help them to find their sweet spot for collaboration, and then to nurture them a little bit here, a little bit there. Not every day, not every week, but every couple of months, just visit the team and see how it's going, and be that backstop for people to have an open voice of communication, a safe, open, and confidential voice of communication to find the potential friction points that might be developing, and then helping the team to act on those friction points before they become issues, and issues unresolved become problems, problems unresolved become litigation.
Cool. So I am sure you've talked about some of the problems and challenges you've seen, but take us back to the very worst problem and challenge, your worst moment in your career. What was that?
Wow. So I have an example. I was an internal facilitator on a project. The project had very challenging site conditions. It was an international project in the Caribbean. It was the contract delivery was design, build, firm, fixed price. So the price was the price and the scope was the scope, and they were already right out of the gate having some issues. I came in, unfortunately, after the kickoff when there were already some issues with the client, and once started to get a little traction on schedule, on the schedule, a little traction on getting materials to the site. And then we over-excavated the site in preparation for foundations. We had Hurricane Ivan, which completely flooded the job site. And there's blame all around here in terms of site conditions and site preparation and dewatering. But unfortunately, the disaster came in that there were very strong personalities in the room on the project. And I wasn't able, as a facilitator, to bring down the walls of anxiety between these two strong personalities. And that led to some strong words and some letter writing. And I wasn't able to get ahead of that as I had wanted to, in order to keep that letter writing from preventing people from being removed from the project and ultimately. So in this situation, we had two folks that were under a very high pressure, high stress environment. And they ended up being transported to the hospital due to what we thought were anxiety attacks, one of which turned out to be a heart attack. And then one of those two never came back to the project. So the failure on my part was to anticipate and get ahead of the problem, get ahead of the letter writing to the point where two people went to the hospital and one person lost their job. It was a failure on my part that I wasn't able, as an internal facilitator, to be seen as completely neutral with the client and the user community. So this is where another example that just supports the perspective that an external facilitator can be seen as neutral from everybody's perspective. This was 17 years ago, and I still think about it today. It was something that I wish I could have done better.
Yeah. Sometimes it's knowing when to bring in the neutral is an important component as well. If that's even a possibility for you. Sometimes it's not. So what is the very best advice you have ever gotten?
Oh, well, that's good. So, a Navy admiral by the name of Thor Erickson, as a Navy SEAL, gave me some advice one time. He said, Grabowski, take care of the team, and the team will take care of the mission. And from that perspective, I've carried that with me for a long time. The team, as we have discussed earlier, can do amazing things if they are high performing and self-correcting, and they have a culture of collaboration and trust inside and internal to the team as a fabric of their communication, where they can say what needs to be said without anxiety on the part of the person receiving it. A good team can take care of a challenging project with challenging finances and a demanding schedule, because they themselves will continue to have fun as they collaborate and rise to the challenge. So the best advice I've ever been given is take care of the team, and the team will take care of the mission.
Cool. So I know there's lots of different technologies. You've worked a lot overseas. I'm sure that there's challenges there. What is kind of your favorite piece of tech that you find most helpful for you, or it could also be in communicating with the team?
Sure. So if you had asked me this question 15 years ago, I would have said my calendar's ability to reconcile time zones. Once that came out and I was able to schedule a meeting and the calendar would automatically account for the person's time zone, that was like nirvana for me, because I was dealing with multiple continents, projects basically around the clock. Today, ironically, I'm glad we're using Zoom here. Zoom is a tool that I use. I use it for my folks overseas. Ultimately, my default is when I begin facilitating, I do it face to face so I can build a personal rapport, understand. I go to the job site or to the client's office. They see me face to face. We shake hands. We have coffee. We talk about things. If I can't do that because the project is in Africa, as an example, or South America, I've got a project going on at the U.S. Embassy in Kampala, Uganda right now. I will use Zoom, which is this application that we're using, to help people see me face to face. I can see them, where they can walk me around the job site with their mobile device. I can see some of the issues and concerns they have. I can say hi to the team on speakerphone. So video teleconferencing and the ability to have that mobile in your iPad or your handheld device, to me, has made a tremendous difference in my ability to begin to nurture an interactive and interpersonal relationship with folks that I have not had a chance to see. And conversely, after we've already met face-to-face and spent time in a room and a workshop and a couple of days at the job site, it's a good touch point for doing things face-to-face, so that you can read the body language.
Excellent. Superb. Yes, I find that to be the case. And more people are just more conversant with it and used to it. So it's not a big deal anymore. Yeah. So we always ask every person who comes to share their gift, a gift with the audience, with our Construction Nation listeners. And so this could be a resource of some sort, some that you find really, really helpful or you think would be helpful to Construction Nation. What you got for us?
I read a book a couple of years ago by Admiral Bill McRaven. He was the top U.S. Navy Special Forces commander, and then he went on to be the chancellor of the University of Texas. And he wrote a book called Make Your Bed. And it's a simple leadership book that talks about getting down to the basics and having and celebrating little successes. Little successes every day lead to great, tremendous successes. And it's a book I actually give out to clients. I got a stack of them. I order on Amazon occasionally, and I'll just hand them out and say, look, here's a good read. It's a good airplane read. You can get it done back and forth across the country if you have time. But Bill McRaven's book called Make Your Bed, very basic tools for celebrating incremental successes that ultimately lead to mission success.
And we will put a link for that on the resources page, and it'll also be on your show notes page at constructiondreamteam.com. So how
Terrific.
Can Construction Nation get a hold of you?
Well, we're available on LinkedIn. Our web address is www.gcc-llc.com. And you can always pick up the phone if you can put my phone number in the link. I personally pick up the phone. I've got a team of 5 people. You might hear them in the office over there. But in terms of interacting personally with the clients, if somebody wants to get a hold of me, ask some questions about this podcast or anything that I can help, just give me a phone call and I'll pick up.
And we will put that in the show notes as well, so everyone will have it.
Yeah.
So, okay, so what's your parting advice for all of us? Something that we could start doing today or tomorrow to really try to build this strong, high-performing, self-correcting team?
Yeah, so that's a good one. And the advice I like to give teams is to understand what I consider to be the 5 greatest words in any relationship. And this could be between spouses or between parents and children. It could be between clients and contractor. It could even be internal to a contracting team. And I think the 5 greatest words to nurture any relationship are, what can I do better? And it's a great sentence to say when there's an issue between 2 people and you want to invest and nurture that relationship. When there's an issue, it could be no greater than a grain of rice in your shoe, but you can't run a marathon with even a grain of rice in your shoe. You've got to address that. You've got to shake it out, get back in your face. So if one person were to say to another, okay, we have this issue, let's set it aside. And without assigning blame or assuming responsibility, they say, what can I do better? And then just stay quiet after the word better and allow that person that you're investing in to respond to that question. And whatever they say, that's the most important thing. Do that thing. Sometimes it could be the littlest, smallest thing. I did an exercise with a team on owner side, and 2 departments within one county agency were not communicating to each other. And I pulled these 2 leaders of the agencies up to the front of the room, and we did the what can I do better exercise. So one person said, okay, what can I do better? And the other person said, I wish your team would return my team's emails and phone calls within a business day. And the first person was shocked. That's it? That's all you need? I'll give that to you for free. And so they promised and committed to get to their team whenever this other agency within the same client department contacted her agency. Her team committed to respond to that communication within one business day. Sometimes it's the simplest things to shake out that little grain of rice so that the team can end up running a marathon. What can I do better?
Excellent. And look at everyone on Construction Nation. You can do that today to the people that you're working with on your projects. Ask that question and then let us know what happens. Jump on LinkedIn and tell us what's happened when you do that, when you follow through with that exercise. So I want to thank you so much, Gregory, for being with us today here on Construction Dream Team. I know that you had lots of kernels of truth and knowledge that will be shared with many, many different projects, and I really appreciate it. And for all of you out there in Construction Nation, dream teams don't just happen. You have to build them, and you build them one step at a time. And Greg has helped you have some more tools in your tool chest here today. So pick them up and use them. And I hope that everyone will be able to tap into the collective wisdom of your team and the entire industry by listening to Construction Dream Team. And why not send out this episode to your entire team so that you have a whole conversation about these ideas and these concepts? Because you can't do it by yourself. It does take an entire team. So the faster you can build your team, the faster you can have your dream team. I want to provide you with the best and the brightest, like Gregory is today. And so if you have a topic, an issue, someone that you want to hear from, let me know. And we will get them here and we will hear from them and learn from them. So send me your suggestions at sue@constructiondreamteam.com. And remember that Construction Dream Team drops every Monday morning at 4 a.m., where I will begin to interview another industry leader or expert so that you can learn from them and you can build your dream team based on their knowledge and know-how. So thank you so much. Thanks, Greg, for being here. And thanks to... Thank you. And everyone, thank you for joining us today. And I will catch you next time.